Anchorage International Airport. January 13, 1977. 5 a.m. A taxi pulled up to the main entrance of the airport, from which a drunken passenger in the uniform of a captain got out, and two other pilots were with him. Then they went to the JAL cargo office. The taxi driver, being a decent American, could not help but fulfill his civic duty and informed the JAL cargo representative that the captain might be drunk.
Hello, I just drove your pilots and noticed that the captain has clear signs of intoxication.
Thank you for letting us know. If we notice something, we will definitely take action.
At 6:20 in the morning, the airline representative informed his management that if the captain was indeed in a state of intoxication, then the co-pilot should immediately cancel the flight. But during the pre-flight preparation, nothing suspicious was noticed in the behavior of the crew, and the preparation for the flight itself takes place in normal mode. On the platform of the cargo terminal, a Douglas DC-8-62AF aircraft is preparing to take off. He will perform transcontinental flight JL-1045 to Tokyo. And the crew already known to us will fly the plane. Captain, 53-year-old Hugh L. Marsh. The same pilot who is intoxicated. Co-pilot, 31-year-old Kunihiko Akitani. Flight engineer, 35-year-old Nobumasa Yakakawa. Also on board the Douglas are two service passengers accompanying the cargo. At the airport, the aircraft passed only an external inspection, which was carried out by JAL cargo employees and hired aircraft technicians from Anchorage Airport. Two local aircraft technicians during the inspection of the engines found that there was ice on the air intakes, shrouds and nose cones, which, however, was not on the control surfaces. Therefore, one of the aircraft technicians told the representatives of the airline that the receiving crew turned on the anti-icing system of the engines. In turn, JAL cargo employees inspecting the aircraft did not notice any ice. The fuel tanks of the DC-8 were estimated to contain a total of 117,285 pounds of aviation kerosene. The new crew accepted the aircraft, and at about 6:03 in the morning they checked the inertial navigation systems, and also received fresh information from the ATIS system, according to which there was fog at the Anchorage airport at that time, and visibility was 1 mile.
Anchorage Earth. Permission to tow and start engines, JAL 1045.
JAL 1045, engine start and towing allowed.
After receiving permission from the dispatcher, at 6:09, preparations for starting the engines began. After 6 minutes, the engines were started and the crew completed the appropriate checklist.
Anchorage taxi, engines running. Clear for taxi to RWY 24 left, JAL 1045.
JAL 1045, taxi, follow taxiways Bravo, Kilo, Charlie, crossing RWY 24 right. Stay in advance.
Following taxiways Bravo, Kilo, Charlie, crossing RWY 24 right hand side, pre-report JAL 1045.
After receiving taxi clearance, Flight 8054 headed for runway 24L, left. In the process of following the airport, the flight engineer asked the captain for permission to turn on the anti-icing system of the engines, since ice was found on the air intakes.
Captain, may I turn on the anti-icing system of the engines?
Yes, do it.
Also during taxiing, the operation of the mechanization of the wing was checked, and the flaps were set to 23 degrees. Further, the crew read out the checklist before takeoff, while the position of the flaps and trim settings were checked again, and when asked about de-icing, the captain replied that they would use only the engine anti-icing system. To which the flight engineer reported that this system was on. The captain also warned the co-pilot and flight engineer about the takeoff at Anchorage Airport and the necessary actions during its abort. At the same time, he noted that the runway is slippery, and therefore it is still better not to interrupt the takeoff. On its way to runway 24L, Flight-1045 was instructed to hold at runway 24R, right. After a few more radio exchanges with the controller, the crew taxied to the runway and reported that they were ready for takeoff.
Anchorage Tower, on runway, ready for takeoff, JAL 1045.
JAL 1045, you are on lane 24 right, take your lane 24 left.
The dispatcher reports that our crew took the wrong runway 24 right, and their runway is 24 left, so the liner turned 180 degrees, slid onto the taxiway and proceeded along it to the beginning of the runway 24 left. At 6:33 flight JL 1045 re-reported ready for takeoff.
Anchorage Tower, left on runway 24, ready for takeoff, JAL 1045.
JAL 1045, clearance for takeoff.
Takeoff cleared.
Stabilized.
The crew switched the oars to takeoff mode and the plane began its run.
Maximum.
Number 4 is growing. 2 and 4 grows.
Nominal mode.
Thank you. Took control.
Transferred control. The speed is increasing. V1.
During the takeoff run at the height of the decision, the crew heard 2 impacts. But the captain did not pay attention to this and continued to run.
Get up.
Get up.
V2.
At this moment, at the speed of the aircraft taking off from the ground, a sound similar to a surge appears. But the captain does not pay any further attention and continues to take off.
Get up.
Overabundance.
Hey.
The co-pilot shouts to the captain that the speed has been reached, but there is not enough lift to get into the air. But the captain does not pay any further attention to the situation and continues to pull the helm more and more. Already at the end of the runway, the liner nevertheless rose to a height of 98 feet, after which, having fallen to the left, it began to rapidly lose altitude. The rudder shaking is turned on and the aircraft goes into a stall.
Captain stall.
But the captain cannot adequately assess the situation in a timely manner and continues to pull the helm towards himself. 150 feet from the runway at Anchorage Airport, in dark and foggy conditions, the plane overran the highway and crashed into the ground. The spread of debris was 1,673 feet by 393 feet. Of the 5 people on board, no one survived. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, is investigating the causes of the crash of Flight JL 8054. Investigators analyzed the takeoff and compared it with other DC-8s taking off under similar conditions. The captain's side speed gauge had 3 base speeds: the decision speed, nose gear liftoff speed and safe takeoff speed, V1, VR and V2, were listed as 134, 148 and 160 knots. And the co-pilot's side speed gauge was 130, 158 and 160 knots. The climb speed for both was listed as 170 knots. At the same time, for the current weight with flaps extended at 23 degrees, according to the flight manual, the speeds should have the following values: V1 137 knots, decision speed; VR 152 knots, speed of separation of the nose landing gear; V2 161 knots, safe speed for takeoff. The co-pilot promptly announced the achievement of a speed of 80 knots, and then the base speeds that were indicated on his instrument. But few people could notice that from the beginning of the rise of the nose landing gear, VR, to the moment of takeoff from the runway, V2, it took 1.5 seconds longer compared to the takeoff of other DC-8 aircraft. Then, after taking off from the runway, noise appears in the background, which is steadily audible until the end of the recording. Investigators determined that the noise was caused by the aircraft's excessive vibration before going into a stall. Airspeed reached 164 knots, after which it began to fall. Having risen to 164 feet above the level of the airfield, the liner fell into a stall and, entering the left bank, began to quickly lose altitude. At that time, computer analysis also showed that the interval for accelerating the aircraft from raising the VR nose gear to safe V2 took longer, and when the aircraft began to stall after takeoff, the crew only aggravated it, as, in an effort to gain altitude, they began to lift higher and higher nose, so when it hit the ground, the pitch was already at least 18 degrees. According to calculations, it was enough to reduce the lifting force by 15% to lead to such an effect. Since the flight from Moses Lake to Anchorage was normal, given the actual weather at the airport, investigators drew attention to the danger of icing. The calculated temperature of the remaining jet fuel after landing was minus 8.3 degrees Fahrenheit, and in Anchorage, the fuel was stored at zero temperature. After refueling, the temperature of jet fuel in the aircraft tanks could be in the range of minus 7 degrees Celsius. At an outside air temperature of minus 7 degrees Celsius, small droplets of water could settle from the fog on the wing, which began to freeze. During the external inspection, this ice has not yet been discovered, and therefore the pilots have not been informed about it. But for a long time of parking, a layer of ice could form on the wing, which significantly worsened its aerodynamic characteristics, including reducing the lift and critical angle of attack. Also, due to the uneven formation of ice, the surface of the wing became bumpy, which increased aerodynamic drag, and therefore the liner now had to pick up speed a little longer. All 5 people on board, 3 crew members and 2 passengers, died immediately when the aircraft was destroyed. An examination of the bodies of the pilots for carbon monoxide poisoning showed a negative result. A test for the presence of alcohol in the blood and soft tissues of the co-pilot and flight engineer also showed negative results, but when checking the body of the captain in blood samples and eye membranes taken 12 hours after death, the alcohol content reached 3 ppm. For comparison, under the Alaskan highway laws in force at the time, a driver was considered drunk if the blood alcohol content exceeded 1 ppm. Due to alcohol in the blood, Captain Hugh L. Marsh was practically unable to perform his duties. Even on the way to the airport, the taxi driver who brought him up noticed inadequate actions, scattered thoughts, slurred speech, and trouble walking. Further, while driving the aircraft, the captain taxied to the wrong lane, without noticing it himself, until the air traffic controller pointed it out to him. Then, during takeoff, the drunken pilot began to raise the nose of the aircraft too steeply, and after taking off from the runway and shaking the steering wheel, he could not recognize the stall and take the necessary measures, instead only exacerbating the situation. In this investigation, the investigators paid special attention to the interaction inside the cockpit, because the captain's inadequate actions could not be overlooked by the rest of the crew. However, the high authority of the captain for the Japanese pilots played a fatal role here, so in this situation they simply showed indifference and did not interfere in his dangerous actions. According to the report, the cause of the crash of Flight JL-1045 was the stalling of the aircraft during takeoff due to incorrect actions of the pilots, aggravated by the icing of the aircraft and the alcohol intoxication of the crew captain. A contributing factor was the lack of action on the part of the rest of the crew to prevent the captain's attempts to take off. The disaster in Anchorage largely occurred due to the fact that the young crew members, co-pilot and flight engineer, simply did not dare to argue with the captain, who was 1.5 times older than them and had much more experience, and even despite the fact that the experienced pilot was drunk and poorly aware of his actions. This aspect was especially emphasized during the investigation, and the NTSB had repeatedly insisted by that time on the need to introduce new procedures for interaction within the crew so that all pilots in the cockpit worked with each other on an equal footing, regardless of experience. As a result, the crash of Flight JL-1045 was one of those that ultimately led to the creation and implementation of the Crew Resource Management (CRM) program.